The next page here is the absolute freakiest page in the entire book. The next page is this Star Wars-y alternate global timeline about how World War III happened and how it led to World War IV, and how we went from the booming 80s to World War III, which Nagai posits with some pretty bold predictions which sound crazy, but aren't too far off from what actually happened, and chillingly predict World War III starting at around 2030. Uncle Go here is predicting some global events like he's Nostradamus, and I need to lay down here that he predicted all these events in 1988, and they are borderline scary for how accurate they are. So it's 1988, and then we move on to the 1990s. In the 1990s, Nagai predicts that there would be a massive Middle Eastern conflict, mostly between Iraq and Iran. And yeah, that was basically the Gulf War and the subsequent war on terrorism, so Uncle Go's getting it right off the bat. Then for the 2000s, Nagai predicts that the Soviet Union would take advantage of the chaos caused by the Gulf War, which did happen at the time, if you consider Putin's various proxy wars and dealings in Syria. So yeah, Go Nagai is correct again. Alright, then in the 2010s, he finally has a wrong prediction. Slightly off the rails, Nagai predicted that a second Korean War would break out, resulting in a coalition of Japan and US backing up South Korea, and they would finally destroy North Korea and reunify Korea. Now, I have to chalk this one up to not happening, mostly because of the death of Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un rising to power, seemingly playing things a lot more safer and a lot less recklessly than his father did, somehow keeping the country just stable enough to keep going. So this is probably the wrongest thing he got in the predictions. But then in the 2020s, back to being kind of correct, Nagai then predicts that the Soviet Union would make a play to conquer all of Europe, which supposedly is in line with Putin's long-term goals for the Ukraine conflict. If he wins in Ukraine, he wants to go on to another country, and he wants to conquer more land. According to Nagai, NATO eventually drags the US into this war, but for whatever reason, the US just doesn't put their whole heart into it. And then by 2030, Russia has conquered all of Europe, uniting Europe into a single super Soviet Union. Now, this is bad, and this is kind of what Vladimir Putin actually has ambitions to currently do, but thankfully that doesn't seem like it's going to happen in real life because I don't think he's going to live long enough to enact his plan. Now, after this, still on a semi-realistic path, Nagai then predicts that by 2030 World War III breaks out. Not between the US and Russia, which would be obvious in fiction, but between Super Soviet Union and China, which again is seemingly set up by current events IRL, as China seems very displeased with Putin's failures in Ukraine and is seemingly planning a land grab of some chunk of Russia after the fact as payback for their failures in Ukraine, and that could turn hostile unless the Russian military is completely expended after the Ukraine war. So yeah, Nagai predicts that for one reason or another, which kind of lines up with what's actually happening. China gets fed up and tries to take back its land from Russia, and Russia is too run out of steam from fighting Europe to actually fight back, igniting World War III. India then gets involved in the conflict, seemingly fighting both sides, and while India, Russia, and China are having this three-year brawl, America finally gets re-involved in trying to re-liberate the other Western European nations from the Super Soviet Union, and eventually America and the Soviets get pissed off and eventually mutually nuke each other for mutually assured destruction. And it's very chillingly close to how close we currently are that, Nagai is making some pretty bold shots about where he thinks World War III is going to be in 2030 in 1988, and it's really creeping me out. So yeah, then he says that World War III goes on for the next 30 years despite heavy use of nuclear warheads, and by the year 2060, World War III finally ends in a nuclear holocaust where 90% of mankind is dead, as well as 4 out of 5 countries in the world. Then it flashes 80 years ahead to 2140, where new countries have been made and another 100-year war breaks out for whatever reason. And yeah, this whole page is crazy, and Nagai is just really freaking me out with the pure speculation about the future from 1988. The fact that it is so close to reality honestly scares me. He only got two things wrong. The only things he got wrong was that he never expected the Soviet Union to collapse, and he never expected Kim Jong-il would die, and his son would be slightly more stable than he was, preventing the collapse of North Korea and the Korean unification. But yeah, this is honestly scaring me that World War III is going to happen soon. Hope everybody's all right. Anyway, let's talk about Mazinger USA.